Today, we're going to nerd out with how to write conditionals to select a subset of our data.
Ooh, what's a conditional?
So a conditional is a logical statement that's going to be evaluated either as true or as false.
Okay.
So every single statement we're going to look at the truth value of that statement. So we're going to talk about every statement being either a true statement or a false statement. And it's going to be one or the other, and there can never be anything that's maybe true or maybe false. It's always going to be a binary decision. It's always going to be true or it's going to be false. So we're going to do this by looking at 6 different ways we can structure conditionals. And using pandas, we're going to look at our data frame and we're going to select a subset of rows by writing df and then putting a square bracket. And inside the square bracket, we're going to write our conditional. So our conditional is going to allow us to evaluate the truth value of some statement based on the data inside of our data set. So what I have here is the first few rows of the Berkeley data set. And this is every single student who applied to UC Berkeley in the fall of 1973. And we may want to look at only those who applied to, for example, major C. So Carly, if we want to look at major C, what variable is the major?
So that is it's called major.
Awesome. So to write this conditional, we want to say we have the data frame, and in our data frame, we want the data that comes from the column major. So df.major, and then we need to decide how we want to compare this. And we have 6 different methods of comparing major to another value. And these 6 different methods are that we can test whether or not major is exactly equal to by using the double equal sign. So this means exactly equal. We can also look at if data is less than another value, or if data is less than or equal to another value. We can look at if data is greater than another value, greater than or equal. And finally, not equals, which we write as an exclamation mark sign and then an equal sign. In computer science, we will often call this exclamation mark just simply bang. So bang equals or not equals is going to be the way that we say that this is not exactly equal.
So Wade, we're trying to figure out if a statement is true, right?
Correct.
And then what happens if it is?
If that statement is true, it's going to be left in the result. So the result of this statement is going to be all rows or all observations from our data set that's stored in the data frame, df, where the statement evaluates to be true. So I'm going to do this on paper, and then I'm going to have Carly load up the data set, and we're going to see if this works out. So Carly, I think we were looking at whether or not the major is major C.
Yes.
So we're going to look at which of the 6 conditionals we want, and we want to see, is the major exactly equal to C? So df.major, we're going to use the double equal sign to indicate exactly equal. And then we want to find out if it's exactly equal to major C. And notice that we are writing this inside of quotes. And we are always going to use quotes when we're comparing an exact literal string. So if we want it to be exactly equal to something, we're going to always use quotes unless, and there's always an unless when it comes to computer science, unless it's a number.
Got it. So if we were checking that the year was equal to 1973, we wouldn't have to use the quotes.
That's a great question. Yeah. So if we wanted to check if the year was 1973 and find out all the rows in this data set where the year was 1973, we would write this exact same square bracket notation where we have df, open square bracket, but now we want to look at the column year. Df.year is this exactly equal to, so double equals, 1973. And because it's a number, it falls under this unless case. So we don't have any quotes here. Let's close out the square brackets. But I don't want you to just believe what I wrote on paper. So Carly, can you pull up a notebook and can we actually program this?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. So Before I do anything with my data frame, I need to load my data frame, right?
Yeah, we've got to do two things. We have to first import the pandas library so we can actually use it.
I can't
So
forget importing pandas.
import pandas as PD will be our first cell.
All right, pandas is imported.
And then the second line is we're going to load this CSV file. And this is the Berkeley data set. So the CSV file can be found at https://waf.cs.illinois.edu/discovery.csv.
Perfect. And I did df equals PD. So I'm using pandas to read the CSV, read_CSV, and then that big long thing.
Yep, inside of quotes, because again, it's a literal statement that is not a
Yes.
number. And let's go ahead and just type df. And this is what I love to do every time I load a data set, just to make sure it looks like what we expect. Do you see the Berkeley data?
I see the Berkeley data set, all 12,763 rows, and then the 4 columns that you have right on the paper.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and write this first conditional we wrote. So I want to write data frame df using now square brackets df at df.major
Okay.
is double equal to C inside of quotes. And here capitalization matters. In every single area here, we have to make sure major is capitalized only in the M, and the major here is capital C, so make sure to capitalize the C, close the brackets. And when you press Shift Enter to run the cell, we should see every single row only contains major C.
Yes, and we do. There's 918. And I have a question for you, Wade. You were saying capitalization matters. So for these square brackets, can I do the parentheses or do I have to use the square brackets?
Absolutely have to use the square brackets. If you do the parentheses, you're probably going to get a scary error.
Ooh, okay. Good to know. So this definitely worked. I did not use the parentheses, so no error.
So, and let's make sure this works by the first row should be index 0. That should be 1973, this person who applied to major C, who was a woman who was rejected in admissions.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Then your second row shouldn't be index 1 anymore.
It's actually index 12. And I have 1973 as the year, major C, gender is M, and they were rejected.
And let's just do the second example you asked, just to kind of finalize everything, to see that quotes don't matter.
Yeah.
So now in a new cell, we're still looking at the same data frame. df square bracket df.year now, because we want to look at when the year is double equal to 1973.
No quotes.
No quotes.
And actually, this data set was from 1973, so it did work because it gave me all of the data.
So every single piece of data was from 1973. One last change. Let's say we want to find out everything that was less than 1973. Let's change this to be less than 1973. We know all the data is from 1973, so I expect to see no results.
Okay, so I did df at df.year less than 1973. And it shows no results, but it's funny because it actually does show the column headings, and then there's just nothing below it.
Yep, so it showed that this is the data we're looking at, this is the structure of the data we're looking at, but there's absolutely no observations that match the conditional. Every single row was evaluated one row at a time, and it asked for row index 0, was the year less than 1973? It was not. So we say this was false. Was the year less than 1973 for row index 1? That was also false, and so on. And every single row was false. What we saw when we looked at major C, the first row was true, then the number of rows until we got to row index 12 was false. So that is a conditional, and we're going to nerd out more throughout this entire series on how to build these conditionals and build more and more complex conditionals and start to combine conditionals together to write complex logical statements to really nerd out with our data.
That sounds wonderful.